Today I'd like to discuss some important lessons in the service of God that we can learn from the story of Cain and Abel, Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel were not Jews. Even in the broadest sense of the word, the first Jew would be Abraham. So this is an instance of the Torah. Before we even begin the family of Abraham, that is discussed and actually relates us some very fundamental messages about the service of Hashem. So let's take a look. Perek Daled, Pasuk Gimel. Chapter 4, verse 3. Vahi Hevel ro'eh tzoyin, v'Cain haya oved adama. So Cain and Abel were the children of the first man, Adam and Chava, his wife, Eve. And they both, as a result of the curse of Adam, that man had to work in order to gain sustenance and support himself and his needs, they both found occupations for themselves. Hevel was a ro'eh tzoyin. Hevel was a shepherd of the flocks. Cain haya oved adama, and Cain worked the fields. Right away, we see a difference in the development of the characters of Hevel and Cain from this very first verse. Hevel involved in himself in an occupation in which he dominated nature. A shepherd directs his flock where to go. He shears the wool off of them. Basically a shepherd is a leader. Of course, he takes care of his flock, but there's an extent of and an element of dominion over the flock. Cain, on the other hand, he worked the earth. When you work the earth, there's actually more of an element of dependency and servitude and anxiety when someone works the earth, because the crop is going to depend on the richness of the soil. It's going to depend on whether it rains or not, and how much irrigation there is. It lacks that element of dominion over it. You don't direct the earth in the same way as a shepherd directs his flock. Now, all this is an allusion to the following. Hevel worked on dominating his zone, his flocks, meaning the animalistic side of himself. He worked on that. Cain, on the other hand, he was dominated by the earthly side of himself. And unfortunately, he was subject to his own instincts. So before we even begin to tell the story about their relationship to God and spiritual things, the first topic of discussion is their character. Because similarly, in a person's service of God, before you even begin to think about, is there a creator, etc., the first thing is character, discipline. Making sure a person's intellect, in terms of doing what's right and ethical, dominates and trumps the instincts of the body. So that's our first verse. Immediately after this, after being told that Hevel perfected his character to a much greater degree than Cain did, we continue to the next verse. Vayimi ketz yamim, vayave Cain mipri adama min chal Hashem. And it was after days, or after a period of time, Cain brought from the fruit of the field, or from the earth, as an offering to God. There's no mention in this verse as to the quality of the fruit of the earth that Cain brought. It simply says that he brought as an offering to the Almighty. Now, Abel hasn't been mentioned yet, so there's an implication here that Cain is the first one to bring an offering. However, there is an element of quality in the offering that's not discussed. You could say that even implies that the quality wasn't important. He gathered together some piece of his crop, maybe a tenth, maybe some other percentage, from wherever he found it, and he brought that as an offering to God. He paid little attention to the quality, as it's not mentioned in the verse. What do we see about Hevel? What does the next verse say? Hevel hevi gamhu mibchorei soinoi mechalveim vayisha Hashem al Hevel val minchasai. It says in Hevel, he too brought from the choicest of his flock, specifically from the first of his flock and the choicest, and God turned to Hevel and to his offering. So, again, it says that Hevel also brought. This indicates that Hevel was not the first, but he actually, you could say, was copying the good behavior of Cain, but he improved upon it. He was careful to bring an offering of quality, to bring from the best that he had. This expressed the fact that this was something important to him, that God played a central role in his life. On the other hand, it seems to be alluded from the story and the representation of Cain's act that it wasn't central to him. It could even be said that Cain approached this in a more self-centered way, where he was hoping that through an offering that he would benefit. So it wasn't that he was working with the intention to give to the Almighty, that one of his prime intentions was to be able to bring a good offering. No. He wanted the best for himself, and you could say God was the last on his list. Was it any surprise that God then turned to Hevel and to his offering and rejected Cain's? In reality, it was not. But yet, let's see how Cain reacts in the next verse, in verse 5. Cain vel minchasai loisha, vayichar leCain ma'od vayiplu fanav. And to Cain and to his offering, God did not turn. And Cain became very angry and became despondent. So what's the reason for this despondency? Unfortunately, what happens to Cain here is really just the tricks of a person's evil inclination and ego. Instead of introspection and thinking about why it was that his offering was rejected, he just becomes angry. He feels victimized. And he falls into a despair. All this is unfortunately leading things in a terribly wrong direction. There was no reason for Cain to fall into despair. The answer to the problem was lying right in front of his face, which leads us to the next verse. And this is because that's exactly what God tells him. Vayomer Hashem al Cain, lama charalach, v'lama nafel fanecha. And God said to Cain, why have you become angry? Why have you become despondent? Haloyim NETIV seis, v'im lo seitiv lepesach chatas roivetz, v'lecha teshukasai, v'ata timshol boy. God says the following: if you would improve your ways, you'll be forgiven. But if you do not, then sin is waiting to pounce upon you, because it's constantly desiring you and wishing to seduce you. But you can overcome it. You can dominate it. So God really gives Cain the advice that we all need. He says to him, you can improve. You can do better. If you don't, however, then the evil inclination is ready to pounce upon you. It's waiting for that moment all the time. But even then, even at that point of test, you can still overcome it. You can still prevail in the struggle against it. Isn't that what Teshuvah is all about? Isn't God telling Cain that there is a power of Teshuvah, that you can improve yourself, that what you did before is not the end, and that a person can overcome the mistakes that he made in the past due to his evil inclination? Clearly, this is one of the first sources of Teshuvah in the Torah.